You're telling me the princess is hugging the human. The whisper cut through the royal court like a spark in dry air. At the far end of the vast chamber, beneath a ceiling of floating crystalline rings that glowed with slow pulses of violet light, the royal heir of the Talirian Empire had wrapped both arms around a very confused human. The human, unfortunately for him, had absolutely no idea what was happening. He stood stiffly in the center of the hall, arms halfway raised in awkward uncertainty, while the princess pressed against him with the kind of warmth that simply did not exist inside imperial protocol. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then the murmuring began. Hundreds of nobles lined the tiers of the court chamber, their luminous skin reflecting the ambient light like polished glass. Their eyes, long, silver, and reflective, shifted rapidly between the princess and the human. Elegant ears tilted in disbelief. A general near the front leaned toward another officer. "Is this some human greeting ritual?" The officer blinked slowly. "If it is, it's extremely reckless." At the center of the chaos stood the human, Evan Cole. Technically speaking, Evan was not supposed to be the focus of attention in an interstellar royal court. His assignment was simple: assist the diplomatic delegation from Earth with routine maintenance on the Talirian communication arrays. He was a systems technician, a repair guy, someone who fixed broken things. He was definitely not someone alien princesses ran across enormous throne rooms to hug. Evan carefully looked down at the royal heir, currently squeezing him like a long-lost friend. "Ugh," he said quietly. The princess finally pulled back slightly, her luminous pale blue skin glowing softly under the court lights. Her silver eyes were bright with excitement. "You're real," she said. Evan blinked. "That's usually how that works, yeah." A few alien nobles gasped softly at the informality. Behind them, a tall court advisor whispered urgently. She addressed him first. She initiated contact. "This is unprecedented." Another noble leaned forward, fascinated. "Look at the human, he's not even bowing." To be fair, Evan hadn't processed the situation enough to bow yet. The princess studied him with clear delight, her long, elegant ears twitching slightly. "It is you," she said. "I knew it." Evan scratched the back of his neck. "Listen, I hate to ruin the moment, but have we met?" More murmurs spread through the court. The heir of the Talirian Empire slowly turned her head toward the towering throne at the far end of the hall. And suddenly the whispers died, because the queen had stood. Queen Seralith was taller than any other figure in the chamber, her posture impossibly graceful, her luminous skin carrying faint patterns of bioluminescent markings that signified her royal lineage. Her eyes, ancient, calm, and terrifyingly intelligent, rested on the human. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to bend gravity. Evan swallowed. He leaned slightly toward the princess and whispered, "I'm guessing that's your mom." The princess nodded happily. "Yes." Evan exhaled slowly. "Great." Across the chamber, nobles watched him like scholars observing a dangerous new species. One diplomat whispered, "Why does he look so calm?" Another replied, "Humans may not fully understand when they are in danger." Two royal guards shifted slightly, their armor humming softly with energy fields. But the princess ignored everything. She turned back to Evan with a smile that seemed completely out of place inside the rigid formality of the imperial court. "You helped me," she said. Evan tilted his head. "I fix a lot of things. You might need to narrow that down." More gasps echoed through the chamber. No one spoke to the royal heir this casually. The princess laughed softly. The sound startled several nobles. "You repaired a reactor core using a plasma relay and a coolant line," she said. "Everyone said it would explode." Evan's eyebrows slowly lifted. "That actually sounds familiar." Across the hall, the queen's gaze sharpened. Every noble in the chamber leaned forward slightly, because suddenly the moment felt different. Not like a strange breach of etiquette, but like the beginning of something none of them had expected. The princess gently took Evan's hands. "You saved my ship," she said. Evan frowned thoughtfully. "Wait, the broken shuttle near the Helios trade station." "Yes, the one with the completely illegal power modifications." "Yes, the one where the pilot refused to tell me her name." The princess smiled. "Yes." Evan blinked twice. Then he leaned back slightly and looked at her again. "You're kidding." The future ruler of the largest alien empire in known space laughed and hugged him again. And this time the entire royal court audibly panicked. "No," the queen said quietly. Her voice was not loud, yet the single word rolled across the chamber like distant thunder. Instantly, the whispering nobles fell silent again. Even the glowing, crystalline rings above seemed to dim slightly, as if the palace itself were listening. Princess Lynara slowly released the human, though she still stood close beside him, one hand lightly holding his arm as if afraid someone might remove him from the room, which, judging by the tense posture of the royal guards, was a very real possibility. Queen Seralith stepped down from the elevated throne platform with the smooth, controlled grace of someone who had ruled for centuries. The long, flowing layers of her royal garments shimmered with faint energy threads that shifted colors as she moved. Every step echoed through the hall. The queen stopped several meters from Evan and studied him in complete silence. Evan had never felt so thoroughly inspected in his life. Not by teachers, not by job interviewers, not even by airport security. Alien empresses, it turned out, were significantly more intimidating. He gave a small, polite wave. Hi. Several nobles made distressed noises. One elderly advisor whispered in horror. He waved at the queen. Queen Seralith did not react to the gesture. Her luminous eyes simply continued observing him, as if analyzing every small detail. "You claim," she said slowly, her voice calm but edged with authority, "that you encountered my daughter near the Helios frontier station." Evan nodded. "Yeah, small ship, damaged reactor housing, coolant leak. Whoever designed that power system should probably be banned from engineering." A few alien engineers in the court shifted awkwardly. The princess hid a smile. The queen tilted her head slightly. "And you repaired it." "Temporarily," Evan said. "It was more like convincing it not to explode immediately." The court murmured again. A military officer leaned toward another. "Convincing a reactor not to explode is not a recognized engineering procedure." Evan shrugged. "Look, if machines liked rules, my job would be easy." Princess Lynara squeezed his arm proudly. "He said the same thing that day." The queen's eyes flicked briefly to her daughter. "You never told us this story." Lynara lifted her chin slightly. "You never asked." A ripple of quiet tension moved through the nobles. Evan raised a cautious finger. "Just to clarify something, when you say princess, do you mean that in a ceremonial way or in the galactic empire kind of way?" The princess smiled brightly. "The second one." Evan closed his eyes for 2 seconds. "Of course it is." Across the chamber, several nobles were still struggling to process what they were seeing. A junior diplomat whispered, "Why does the human show no fear?" An older noble replied quietly, "He may not understand the gravity of the situation." Or another voice said thoughtfully, "He simply doesn't care." The queen's gaze returned to Evan. "The Helios station incident," she said, "was classified as a catastrophic reactor cascade. Our intelligence reported that survival was statistically impossible." Evan scratched his head. "Well, it almost was." A few nobles leaned closer. "The reactor core had already started phase drift," Evan continued. "If it had reached full cascade, the whole station would have turned into a very bright memory." The room grew quieter. "You stopped it," the queen said. Evan hesitated. "Technically." "How?" Evan opened his mouth, paused. Then he gave a small shrug. "I improvised." Several alien scientists in the chamber looked physically offended. "That is not an explanation," one of them muttered. Evan glanced around the enormous hall filled with elegant alien aristocrats staring at him like he was a puzzle. "Okay," he said slowly. "Imagine your reactor is a giant angry animal." Silence, the princess nodded enthusiastically. "That is exactly how he described it before." Evan pointed at her. "See, she remembers." One of the court engineers pinched the bridge of his nose. "You do not calm a reactor by treating it like an animal." Evan tilted his head. "You've never tried talking to one." Several nobles looked horrified. The queen, however, had not taken her eyes off him. Her gaze had grown sharper. "You rerouted the power grid," she said quietly. Evan blinked. "Yeah. You bypassed the containment protocols. Only temporarily." "You forced the core into manual thermal balancing." Evan stared at her. "Wait, how do you know that?" The queen did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked slowly across the court. "Because," she said, "our engineers spent 6 months studying the reactor data after the incident." Now the scientists in the chamber leaned forward intensely. "And none of them," the queen continued calmly, "could understand how it was done." Every eye in the chamber returned to the human. Evan shifted awkwardly. Princess Lynara smiled proudly beside him. "He makes machines behave." Evan rubbed the back of his neck again. "I wouldn't go that far." But the court was no longer whispering in confusion. Now they were studying him with something else. Curiosity, suspicion, and slowly growing beneath it all. Respect, Queen Seralith took one final step closer. For the first time, the ruler of the Talirian Empire stood directly in front of the human technician. "You saved the life of my daughter," she said. The entire chamber held its breath. Evan looked at the princess, then back at the queen. "Well," he said carefully, "when you put it like that, it sounds way more important than it felt at the time." The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she asked a question that made the entire court tense. "Human," she said, "why were you able to do something my empire's greatest engineers could not?" Evan looked at the queen for a long moment before answering. The entire court waited. Rows of alien nobles sat perfectly still beneath the glowing crystal arches, their luminous skin reflecting the soft violet light of the chamber. Commanders, diplomats, scholars, and royal advisors, all watching a single human technician, as if the future of interstellar engineering depended on whatever came out of his mouth next. Evan shifted his weight. "Well," he said slowly, "first of all, I didn't know it was impossible." A ripple of quiet confusion passed through the court. One of the Imperial engineers frowned. "That cannot be the entire explanation." Evan shrugged. "When you grow up fixing human machines, you learn something pretty early." The queen tilted her head slightly. "And what is that?" Evan gave a small, crooked smile. "Most systems aren't designed to survive idiots." A few nobles blinked. The princess covered her mouth, trying not to laugh. "But humans," Evan continued, gesturing lightly with his hands, "build things that break all the time. Power grids, ships, reactors, engines. Stuff fails constantly. So we get good at making weird solutions that weren't in the manual." The engineers exchanged uncertain looks. "You altered a stabilized plasma loop using an external coolant bypass," one of them said carefully. No one in the Empire had ever attempted such a maneuver. Evan nodded. "Yeah, because it's a terrible idea." The room grew quiet again. "But," Evan added, raising a finger, "it was slightly less terrible than the reactor exploding." For a second, the chamber remained silent. Then, unexpectedly, one of the older alien engineers let out a short laugh. It spread quickly. Another scientist chuckled. Then another. Soon quiet laughter echoed through the court, an unusual sound in a hall normally dominated by rigid formality. Princess Lynera grinned openly. "He said the same thing when the reactor stabilized," she told them. He leaned against the wall and said, "Well, that probably shouldn't have worked." Evan shrugged modestly. "I stand by that statement." Queen Seralith, however, was still studying him with that same careful intensity. "You risked your life," she said. Evan shook his head. "Not really. The reactor could have destroyed the entire station." "Sure," Evan said casually. "But someone was still inside the ship trying to restart the navigation system." The queen's gaze flicked to her daughter. "You." Lynera nodded quietly. For the first time since the hug, the princess looked slightly emotional. "I was afraid," she admitted softly. The court fell silent again. "I was stranded," she continued. "My escort vessels had already been destroyed by the reactor shockwave. My ship would not start. And she squeezed Evan's arm again, walked into a collapsing reactor chamber like it was a broken kitchen appliance." Evan made a small defensive gesture. "Okay, that's not entirely accurate." Several nobles leaned forward. "You also yelled at the reactor," the princess added. "That helped," Evan said. One of the engineers muttered, "That should not help." The queen finally turned fully toward the court. Her expression had changed. The earlier suspicion was gone. Now there was something else in her eyes, understanding. "For centuries," she said slowly, her voice carrying across the hall, "the Talirian Empire has viewed humanity as a young species. Creative perhaps, but insignificant." No one in the court interrupted. "But today," she continued, "I see something different." Her gaze returned to Evan. A human who acted without hesitation, without recognition. Without knowing he stood before royalty. Evan lifted a hand slightly. "In my defense, she absolutely did not mention that part." The princess smiled. "That was intentional." The queen ignored the exchange and stepped forward. Royal guards straightened instantly. The entire court watched. Then, in a gesture no one in the chamber had ever seen before, Queen Seralith inclined her head toward the human. It was not a deep bow, but it was unmistakably a gesture of respect. Gasps echoed through the hall. Evan blinked rapidly. "Oh, wow," he whispered. "I really hope that doesn't mean I just got promoted to something." The princess laughed. The queen spoke again. "Human Evan Cole," she said clearly. "You saved the life of the heir to the Talirian Empire and unknowingly prevented a cascade event that could have destabilized 3-star systems." Several diplomats in the chamber stiffened as the political implications settled in. "You acted without ambition," the queen continued, "without demand for reward." Evan nodded. "That's mostly because I thought she was just a stranded pilot." The princess looked amused. "I liked that version of the story." The queen allowed the faintest hint of a smile. "Today," she said, "this court has witnessed something rare." Her voice grew stronger. Not the power of an empire, but the courage of an ordinary human. Every noble in the chamber slowly rose to their feet. It began with the engineers, then the diplomats, then the generals. One by one, the entire royal court stood in silence. Evan looked around nervously. "Okay," he whispered to the princess, "this is starting to feel like I accidentally started a religion." She leaned closer. "You did something much more impressive." "What's that?" She smiled warmly. "You surprised an empire." Across the chamber, the queen raised a hand. "From this day forward," she declared, "humanity will no longer be regarded as a minor civilization within imperial records." Murmurs of astonishment swept through the nobles. "Instead," the queen said firmly, "they will be recognized as a people capable of courage, ingenuity, and loyalty." She turned once more toward Evan. "And sometimes," she added, "it only takes one human to remind the galaxy of that." The great crystalline rings above the throne room brightened slowly, filling the chamber with radiant light. And standing awkwardly in the center of the most powerful alien court in the galaxy, Evan Cole quietly muttered to himself, "Next time I fix a reactor, I'm definitely charging extra."